Hey, it's Barry.
Hey, it's Nate.
Come on, Brian.
Hey, it's Brian.
Brian!
Hey, it's Brian. How's that?
And welcome back to the Collecti-Bros podcast. On this episode of Collecti-Bros, it is going to be the Game Boy Advance retrospective special. We talk about all about the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, the Game Boy Micro, anything in the Advance family. But before that, what have we been playing? Have we had any recent pickups? Who do you want to start? Playing or pickups?
Oh, not for me. It won't take 15 minutes to describe how awesome Like a Dragonation is again. But yeah, I'll just go first. Fuck it. I've been playing Like a Dragonation still because it takes 800 hours.
Oh my god.
It's still a blast. I'm still loving every minute of it, but that's pretty much what I've been playing. How about you, Nate and Barry? How's that for condensing it, huh?
Hey, Barry, you can go ahead and go first.
What I've been playing? Truth be told, it's still been Call of Duty. But then...
Got you good.
But then...
Sherry and I got Barry on all of our worst gaming habits, like, literally.
It scratches that itch of my brain where it's like, you see the numbers go up and there's stuff to unlock. I'm like, I don't care about half of these guns, but I'm like, I gotta unlock the camos. I don't even use the camos. I use the same camo for every single gun. And like, I won't pick another one at this point because I like it so much. But I still gotta unlock the rest of them, so that's all I do.
It's a perfect, like, brain neutral game, though. Like,
Yeah.
And honestly, they did a really good job with this one, too. So, like, I haven't played as much as I want to with you guys. My schedule's finally, like, back to normal, so I'm going to start getting on with you guys more. But it is, like, the perfect game if you're just like, oh, I got a little bit, I'll run some. Well, I got another 10 minutes. Well, I got another 15, and you just get sucked into, like, unlocking stuff.
Well, the problem here is I don't know if we'll keep playing Call of Duty because now we're playing Destiny.
Literally all of our bad gaming habits. You're welcome.
So, because I got Destiny 2 and a couple expansions or whatever from free from PlayStation 1 month, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I remember playing Destiny at launch and liking it and then being bored really quick, but now all these videos that get coming up on my phone are just like Destiny videos of these. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what a strand is. I don't know what the void, blah, 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 whatever. I'm just watching people make these crazy
story.
Builds.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. So I installed it, and then one of my friends is like, don't tell anybody, but I might play this game again if you're going to play it. Which y'all know you guys know who that is. And then Brian's like, oh, I'll play it with the story through you. And so we were playing it last night, because I'm like, oh, I'm kind of scared to play this game. And they're like, oh, it's not that bad. No, that was a lie. All right, this game is not new player friendly whatsoever. I got into it. I can't figure out like where my quests are. The journey tab where you level up your guardian that has separate quests that you have to individually track for them to pop up, and then there's just quests. I don't really know what those are. The campaign quests, I imagine.
Bro, also, I don't want to cut you off, but like, it's not just new player unfriendly. It's veteran player unfriendly also. Like, it is vastly different because like Sherry and I put literally days into this game. Like, we were experts at one point, running raids and stuff. It's a completely different game now.
All right. Well, let me tell you this story of what Brian did to me last night. So Brian finally pops on, and we're just like, okay, Brian, let's catch you up to me, because I was maybe a couple hours further along, not that much. He started a new character and had to go through the main tutorial shit or whatever. So me, Brian, and Sherry are playing, and Sherry's been great. Sherry goes through it slow, is like, hey, this is what this means, and if I have any questions, I'm like, I don't know what this is. And she's like, all right, well, if you go over to this tab, do you see this here? And that's what this is, and blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. So Sherry's teaching me, nice teacher. And then Brian joins. And Brian's like, oh, we gotta go to this. Click. And I'm just like, where the fuck am I? He just like took over the fire team, started teleporting me places. I'm just like, what the fuck? And he's like, well, what do you gotta find? I'm like, a lost thing. I don't know what that is. And they're like, okay, we got to go over here. And I'm just like, I'm just following. I don't understand like where he's finding. He's like, oh, I already did this a while ago. This is what it is. And I'm like, how did you find this? He's like, we got to go in this hole. And I'm like, how did you know the hole was there? I can't play this by myself. I'm like, Brian's doing everything for me. And I'm like, so we get to this one. I don't even know if it was a quest. Was it like a main?
Yeah, it was a story quest.
Main tutorial story quest or whatever.
It was the first quest after one of the expansions after Cade dies because you have to go find his stash.
Okay, well, see, I don't know any of that. I don't even know who Cade is. All right,
The coolest
He
character.
was the best character in Destiny, and they fucking smoked him, unfortunately.
in the game's really confusing because like it's trying to make me buy Lightfall. So like today I booted up and instantaneously got through into
Hate it.
Lightfall content, and I'm like, who is the Emperor? Well, who is this person that's got smoke coming out of their head? What's this giant white moon thing blasting? I don't know what this is. I don't understand this game. So we go in here and it's like, oh, is this the jumping mechanics one? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm playing as a warlock.
Sherry's just like, fuck.
Apparently,
this is the jumping one.
apparently the warlock has the worst jumping of the three. I don't know. I just picked warlock because he looked cool and he has like, I don't know, cool magic powers or whatever. 3 seconds later, Brian's already at the end. He's like, oh, I already picked up the exotic weapon. And me and Sherry are just like 10 minutes back, maybe still 10 minutes back, trying to jump on platforms. I got him just in my fucking ear. I got Sherry over here being like, fuck, like falling down.
Sherry's so bad at jumping.
I can't figure out how the warlock jumps at all because it's not a double jump. It's like a jump and then you jump and you glide.
Covers, yeah.
But I didn't know that you had to hold the jump button because this game doesn't tell you how to fucking jump. I guess this was the way of the game teaching you how to fucking jump.
You gonna learn.
So I was like, everybody shut up. I was like, Sherry, since you're playing the warlock right now, teach me how to jump, please. I was like, Brian, shut up. And he's just up there. He's just like, oh, I went all the way to the end thinking it would teleport you guys up here.
To help.
Yeah, you were trying to help by not letting me play the game, Brian, yet again.
So this seems on brand.
I was trying to be efficient, all right?
And then I finally figured out how the stupid glide things work. And I was like, okay. And the next thing you know, I'm fine. But then Sherry is just like, at first Sherry was doing great. Sherry's like, oh, this is how you jump and this is how you do it. And then next thing you know, it flips and Sherry's just missing every fucking jump. And I'm just standing there up with Brian just watching this. Like, we can't do anything about it at all.
It's funny because she's like, she never played Warlock. So like Destiny 1, she was always the hunter. Destiny 2, she played primarily as a hunter. So she has no idea how the gliding works, and it's so foreign to her. It was fun.
It didn't make any sense. And now I'm at the point where like I guess you can unlock abilities, like extra abilities for your class or whatever. I only have one class unlocked, I don't know. But there was a movement option, so I can unlock all of these like advanced movement options for jumping, and I said, bruh, I can barely handle the basic. What is this glide, strafe, whatever stuff? I don't understand. It's fun, but like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Say it's Destiny in a
I
nutshell.
have no clue.
I think mechanically it plays great. Like the shooting is fun, but trying to explain it to somebody.
The UI is awful.
Horrible.
Because like you have the start button, which brings up like your character kind of sheet almost in your inventory, and then you have another button where you press it for like your little ghost that has a bunch of other UI shit on there. And then you gotta press and hold the same button for the map and a bunch of other shit on there to get to your quests. And like the season, I'm like, why do I have 3 start menus in this game? This makes no sense. There's no mini map. Can y'all please put a damn mini map in your fucking Destiny game?
Navigation's always been difficult in Destiny for me. I don't know if I'm just a dullard, but I've always had a hard time trying to find out what the hell I'm supposed to be doing. There's a lot of times, Brian, where am I going?
Right.
Do his thing.
Sherry is the expert, bro. Unless it's jumping, she's the expert.
And then like I'm just like, I'm supposed to do this quest, but I can't find where the quest is. And it's like, oh, you can't see the quest anywhere unless you freaking mark it. And then, dude, as much as I'm complaining, it's really fun to play. But like,
when you get a group of friends together, Destiny is fun when you're doing like the raids and stuff. I mean, they're stressful, but wait till we get to the raids, Barry.
I will say I played this game with you guys, and that was it. And I didn't have a chance to learn it on my own yet. So now I'm trying to go through it solo to kind of like look at everything and figure out what everything does. Because I can't figure it out for myself if I just got someone yelling in my ear, this is what this is, this and this and this. And I'm like, I can't, how do I, like Sherry tried to explain mods to me in the way that Sherry was trying to explain it. I'm like, what are you talking, what menu were you on? Where are you? She's like, I click this. And I'm like, I am here. What are you talking about? The energy level next to it. I'm like, what energy? What does that even mean?
I love how there's like literally 3 different levels now. It used to just be all about light level back in the day. And now it's like, oh, you've got your season level, your light level, your guardian rank. Like, it's so just...
It's a lot.
It's like,
you overwhelming.
You like numbers? Play Destiny. like not know
Yeah,
anything about the
numbers-
story or what the fuck's going on.
Destiny is a numbers build mechanic type shooter. Like, you want to break a system, you play Destiny.
Yep.
If you want to know what's going on, don't play that. Like, I don't know what's going on in fucking Destiny.
I don't think anyone does.
They cut out the whole first part of the campaign. Is that right?
Yeah, the original
So-
launch Destiny 2 campaign and the first 2 expansions that were included in the first season pass, which if you bought the collector's edition like me, it's invalid. It's out of the game.
Because, like, they're just like, oh, this Osiris guy, blah, 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 and some witch took his fucking body over. And I'm like, what expansion am I in?
Yeah, if you're a new player, you
What
have
am I
no idea who the fuck
doing?
Osiris is. And he was like a big deal in the first expansion. It was about his journey and shit.
And they're, like, still trying to make him a big deal because he has some part to play in Lightfall. But I'm just like, who is this guy and the fucking Silver Surfer twins showing up? Who are you?
Bro, my head hurts thinking about it.
Dude, so I at this point, like, I tried to pay attention to understand what the story was doing, and I'm just, I
Just
don't
hold
care.
B or hold
Because it's
circle.
going in so many, because they want you to buy the new expansion. They're trying to promote the new expansion by, like, showing you exactly what the new expansion has with the strand abilities and whatnot, and do the missions and kind of introduce you to the story. But I'm like, bro, I'm like 5 expansions behind.
And I hate how they do it too, with like
No.
a gun to your head, like, buy it! You're playing this level as soon as you drop fire team.
I
Like,
know.
I jumped out of a fire team because I had to do a mission solo, and it immediately threw me into a mission for the expansion, like you were saying.
Yeah, that was weird. I didn't
Horse
experience
shit.
that because, like, when we got to the point where Brian was supposed to go to the tower for the first time, it threw him into Lightfall just out of nowhere. It was just like,
No
meh.
sparrow. I was just trying to get my fucking sparrow.
Like, it's frustrating because I was not a huge fan of the first Destiny, and I got hooked on 2, like, instantaneously. 'Cause I thought all my complaints were addressed, and a part of the complaint was, like, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing half the time. And when I first launched 2, it was so, like, concise and clear, and the story was good. I was like, fuck yeah. I kind of fell out of it when they started adding expansions and shit, but it's disappointing because, like, that was my favorite aspect of 2. And I know that game's, like, development / journey's been hell and back, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but it's really unfortunate they got rid of the original stuff for it because Destiny 2 at launch was fantastic.
I was
Campaign was top tier.
It's
like,
just
I put it up there
so-
with Titanfall 2. Like,
it's so
great.
confusing to me because, like, on one hand, they don't want people to feel like they're stuck in the beginning to not play with their friends or whatever. So they kind of put everybody at, like, the 1600 now, and it's not hard to get up to max level. But I'm used to, like with Final Fantasy 14, like, when you start at the beginning and you can't skip unless you buy story skips. But, like, you have to play through it in order to get anywhere. You have to know what's going on in the story, and that's how you learn about your job and your class and
How your character
all
works.
all your character works. Like, in this one, it's just throwing me in the end game, and I'm like,
numbers.
I have no foundation to go off of right now.
Frustrating.
Buy some emotes. Maybe it'll make it more
Ugh.
clear. Buy some cosmetics. It'll
The
become more
cosmetics
clear.
are pretty fucking cool, I will
They
say.
are, I'm not gonna lie, there's some sick-ass
they're
ones.
they're pretty dope. I want to like it. I do like it,
I like the gameplay.
but I am so lost.
It's a lot of information overload.
Yeah.
I've literally put days into that game, and I'm still like, Sherry, what are we doing?
It really does feel like Halo though. Like the fun, like how Halo felt floaty and like the way the gun moves and shoots. It,
Shooting, the moment
and-
moment shooting so good.
and like I can tell like when the character models come down, I'm like, that's a fucking brute, bro. Like that's exactly what this is. It feels like Halo, like back when I really liked playing Halo. So that's kind of nice, but it doesn't feel like a Halo clone.
Like, cosmetically, the world is so fucking cool looking. Like, the action figures, I have several of them. Like, I'm not even a huge Destiny guy, but, like, they look so badass. I'm like, yeah, I have to buy this. This is, like, the coolest action figure that I own. It's like a Destiny figure.
The big dude with the fur collar.
Fuck
that
yeah,
thing
he's
is
got, like,
sick.
armor and
I
axes
don't know
and
who that
shit. I'm
is,
like-
but he's cool.
He's like the Weapon Master dude in original. I don't know where the hell
Lord
he's at.
Shanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Is he the
badass.
Titan guy?
Yeah, he's got the
Okay.
broken horn and shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's badass.
hard as fuck. But I'm like, I've got some like the vehicles and stuff for like the Mega Blocks too, because they look awesome. But yeah, as far as like the game looks, the world's incredible looking. It's definitely not a Halo clone at all.
I like how it's atmospheric too. Like Barry and I were like trying to headshot enemies for a patrol or whatever, and we went down this like super deep dark hole, and I'm like, something bad's gonna be down here.
It was
Like, you just know-
scary.
yeah,
It was scary.
yeah, man. Destiny, it can be great, and it can be at its highs, it's awesome, and at its lows, it's like, what the fuck?
At this point, all I know how to do are public events. That's it. I was just like, you show up at the time, you gotta find a little puzzle to get the big bad dude show up, and you get loot. And I'm like, that's enough for my dumb smooth brain to
Hey,
understand.
for now, as long as your light level's going up, keep doing what you're doing, making that light level go up.
So I'm just like,
Tracing arbitrary numbers at this point. That's what we do in Destiny.
you just let me out on the map, and I just shoot stuff and find things, I guess.
Pretty much
But
until you get to the raids.
Nate, what have you been playing? MLB The Show 23.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
take a quick update, yearly update. The show 23 is out. Sony makes the best sports game on the market. I say it every year. Last year was a down year for the game in general, but this year's they hit a grand slam. They added features like the Negro League. They have like individual players that kind of get their story told to like kind of a new audience because Negro League's they've done a good job of preserving
What league?
The Negro League. So back when segregation was a thing, like African Americans weren't allowed to play with white people, and some of the greatest baseball players of all time were kind of hidden.
All right, I just had to sit there and figure out if you were mumble mouthing or if that's what I was hearing.
No, Negro League, yeah. So like it's cool they gave them like individual stories, and like you can unlock them for your team, for your Diamond Dynasty team if you complete their story. And they partnered with the Negro League Foundation, like their museum, their Hall of Fame, and combined elements. So like the commissioners, the narrator, it's really well done. It's fantastic. So with the show, it is the least predatory sports game on the market too. A lot of other games, Madden, FIFA, they charge you to play like the card mode. MLB, if you play it, you pretty much can unlock everything just by putting numbers in. You are allowed to spend money if you want, but there's really no advantage to it. The other big feature they added this year is the World Baseball Classic. I told myself I was not playing Diamond Dynasty this year, but they added World Baseball Classic into Diamond Dynasty, so I was like, oh, I'll check it out. Yeah, that didn't work. I'm playing World Diamond Dynasty again, but World Baseball Classic is a big deal for baseball. It's kind of bringing a new eyes on baseball from the globe. Finally, baseball is an international game, but it's huge in Japan. And Japan won the WBC this year. You got like a lot of people watching it. So like baseball is, and they changed a lot of the rules that aren't really implemented in that mode. They're implementing like the franchise and everything. Usually a year behind on Diamond Dynasty, but it's exciting time for baseball. It's in a really good place. A ton of great talent. Like I feel like it translated really well this year. Like they kind of had to do well with this year's game because like baseball's got a whole new audience looking at it. So it's like, hey, go pick up the game. The game needs to be good. They absolutely delivered. Sony, fantastic job making the game this year. Like I'm not going to go over too much, but everything you would want like in a sports game if you're going to spend money on it, like I need to see this improved. I need to see this improved. They absolutely did it, and it's a quality game every year, but it's certainly like a step above this year. There's shit they didn't have to do. It's fantastic. I can't recommend that enough if you're into sports games in general. Even if you're not, it's a quality game.
Nope. I'm out.
Right. I don't expect it to be everyone, but like it's on Game Pass, so if you're interested in checking it out, like that's totally amazing that it's been on Game Pass 3 consecutive years. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, I highly recommend it if you're into it, if you're at all. It's a quality game. It's great that Sony's put it on other platforms. I just wish they would stop abandoning PC players and put it on fucking PC. It's insane for 3 years in a row that hasn't been.
PC players been shit on. I don't think they want it.
They don't have a baseball game. It sucks. Like you have the simulators and stuff, but like so as far as like a playable baseball game, it's sad. The RBI baseball, but it's not good. So especially when the show's sitting there, it's like, why would I want to play that?
PC players have been getting shit on for ports, like the Last of Us port. Fucking
Oof.
awful. Like I don't think they want it anywhere. They're just like, fuck you. You're gonna put this piece of shit garbage out. Look, that's why I just play PC and I have a console. I don't have an issue.
Same.
I know some people can't do that, but I don't know. If you're finding $2,000 to spend on your PC, you can buy an Xbox. That's all I'm saying. Just have one. It's fine. Console PC war is over. Okay. It's done. PC superior? Well, The Last of Us remake would say otherwise.
Your hardware might be.
Just
development is not.
all console wars should be over. Everything on the market's a fantastic product at this
I'm going to go one step
now.
further. All wars.
Ooh.
Period.
World
Wow.
peace.
World peace on the Collecti-Bros podcast.
As he throws up the peace sign.
But yeah, that's what I've been playing a lot of. I need to get on Call of Duty and Destiny with you guys. I have them installed now, so I got free time. I'll start playing with you guys again.
All right, well, if you want to start Destiny, don't invite Brian yet.
Want to is a strong word, but I'll play it with you, Barry.
We'll
You don't want to play anything with me. You just end up playing it.
It's not that. Oh, that's,
Yeah, uh-huh. You don't want to play anything
it's not
with
about
me.
you, Barry. It's about the games we're picking.
What do you mean it's about the games we're picking?
Destiny is terrifying. I've played it and I'm scared of it. So
Nah, I just pull the trigger.
Yeah, just shoot stuff.
Set brain to neutral and pull the trigger. It's just, yeah, instead of PvP, it's PvE is why I like Destiny. Like when Sharon and I first got together, one of the first games I introduced her to was Destiny. And she was like, I love this. Like, I like that you just mindlessly shoot shit and it's not other humans. Like, Call of Duty, she used to play like Call of Duty, and still does. And she was like, sometimes you just get waxed or whatever and it's not fun. But like PvE, it kind of like lowers the anger levels, I guess. So it's fun just to set brain to neutral.
Because I'm not mad at this dude coming out of nowhere and just fucking sniping me when you're trying to do something.
At least your buddy can respawn you, or you can respawn.
Or, nobody has to lure you into the PvP zone like in RuneScape and then, say they're going to give you all this money and get you up there and then steal your shit.
Or, you get smashed by drop pods 3 times in one public event.
That
didn't happen.
That was funny. Did you know how those worked?
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know the first time. This is before. I know we keep talking about Destiny. It's fine. This is before either of them joined me. I was loading it up. I think Sherry was busy doing something. She's like, oh, if I finish this one, I'll come get you. I was like, okay, what's this weird diamond thing on the map? There's a little flag. I'll stand here and it's a public event. Okay, let's see what this is. I was knowing I'm going to get smoked, right? Next thing you know, this thing falls out the sky and almost kills me. I'm like, what the fuck is this? She's like, oh yeah, shit drops out the sky. If you're not too careful, you'll die. And I was like, oh, okay. So finally, we do the first one with Brian. He's over there standing by the flag. Because sometimes they don't drop out the sky. So I've now learned to not stand by the goddamn flag. So Brian's standing by it, and he just gets smoked by a drop pod instantly. I said, hey, Brian, wouldn't it be funny if you die with a drop pod, and then not even 2 seconds later, it smacked him?
Spoke it into existence.
Yeah.
2 previous... maybe Activision is a thing for me. Literally the night before in Call of Duty, I was like, hey, this dude's getting ready to drop a care package. And as I spawn on shipment, it just...
All right, what about quick pickups? Finny the Fish. Finny the Fish boy.
Finny the Fish.
We got Finny the Fish for PS2.
We both got Finny the Fish on PS2.
Hell
I'm about to add that one to my collection.
It looks fucking awesome.
Straight up all of our alley.
Nate, you picked anything up recently?
Sacrilege for the second consecutive time we talked about it. I bought a digital game again, but it's only available digitally. Diablo 2 Enhanced Edition or whatever it's called. It's on sale for $8 right now. So I feel like that was a can't miss.
On Steam?
On Xbox. I don't know about PlayStation, but
I don't know what's on PlayStation.
It was $8, dude. So I was like, okay, it's a $40 game. It came out not too long ago. It's I got to grab this while it's on sale. So I love Diablo 2. I've heard mixed things about it, but
I've heard Diablo 2 is the best one in the series.
It's my favorite one, the original one. I haven't played this remaster remake.
Oh, it's yeah, okay.
I'm the one that bought it because I was like, I'm a huge Diablo mark, and I was like, D2 guys, let's...
Well, I didn't buy it when you did initially because you're like, we're going to play this. I'm like, no, we're not. You're going to start it for a week, and then we're going to disappear and not play it for anything. I was right, so...
Solo, I mean, if you play it with a group, again, it's one of those games you got to play with a group.
Well, I picked it up because it was too good of a deal to pass up, so...
Hell yeah. So
it's digital only, so I don't feel like it's a crime buying it, so...
Yep.
That's my only pickup lately.
Brian, other than Finny the Fish, okay.
Yeah, definitely got Finny the Fish. I want to highlight a couple Atari games I got really quick, though, because I usually don't buy Atari games, but I picked up Raiders of the Lost Ark, which, whatever, it's Indiana Jones, was 99 cents. I picked up Tapeworm off the name alone, because it's called Tapeworm, and I want something that says Tapeworm on my shelf.
Okay.
And then I found Frankenstein's Monster, which is actually a fairly uncommon game. It's $50 Atari cart, it's 99 cents. So that was pretty cool.
Got him.
Scoop that up.
You can still find Atari deals out there. It's weird because the collection market for it's pretty much dead. Everyone who wants their Atari games pretty much has them. So when you do find them, they're either everything's $1 or everything's $10. It's stupid. So there is still some finds in the Atari bins every once in a while though.
Yep. Just gotta know what you're looking for.
Sure, I don't see an in between. It's 99 cents or $99.
Yep.
It's a really fun system to collect for if you're into it, though, because just the label variants and shit alone makes it a super colorful collection on your wall. And if you're not into everything looking exactly the same, it's a great collection.
Yeah.
If you want your shelf to look uniform, good luck.
All right, we getting into it.
Let's get into Game Boy Advance.
So the Game Boy Advance is a Nintendo handheld console. Came out in 2001. It had 3 versions: Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, and the Game Boy Advance Micro. SP came out in 2003, 2 years later, and 2 years later again the Micro. A little bit about it. The big thing for the Game Boy Advance is honestly for me the backwards compatibility. That was a big deal when it came out. It was the successor to the Game Boy Color, and not only did it have its own library, it could still play Game Boy Color games and Game Boy games. The Micro cannot play. The Micro is not backwards compatible, but the SP and the Game Boy Advance are, which was the primary ones that sold anyways. As far as sales, speaking of, it has sold in its lifetime, as of 2010, 81.51 million units.
Wow.
Which makes it the 10th most sold console overall. It's a smidge under 360, and it's either over or on par with PSP. PSP numbers kind of fluctuate between 80 and 82, so it's right in the middle of that. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I mean, the PSP had not only 3 versions, but the Go, which the Go didn't sell well, but you have to throw some of that in there too. The PSP was very successful.
Think about the jump too between the PSP versus the Game Boy Advance. Also,
Yeah.
like
That's
astronomical.
crazy.
That was a
You
lot
always
of
think
years
of it as like
later,
a not forgotten console, but it's kind of been lost in a shadow. And then Game Boy's got this pedestal.
I think that's the crazy thing about the Game Boy Advance, like how big of a juggernaut the original Game Boy was. The fact that you basically had the same, I mean, they had the color come out between, but a 12-year gap of running the original big bulky Game Boy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is
Yeah.
fucking crazy. Like only
they're-
Nintendo can pull that off.
I mean,
They had
if
a
we
lot riding on this, man.
if we look at it into comparison, like PSP was in competition, I suppose, with DS, and DS just smoked it.
Yeah.
Like the PSP still sold more than the 3DS, but the DS family alone was incredibly successful.
Right.
I guess I didn't realize the PSP sold that well. That's crazy.
Almost 100 million, yeah.
Good for
So
Sony. Damn.
It sold, if I remember the list, it sold about 4 million units less than the 360.
That's why the failure of the Vita is such a crime, but that's for a different episode.
No kidding.
But the Game Boy Advance, so it's like what, third or fourth landscape style. It's the first landscape style handheld in the Nintendo family.
Fourth, because Wonder Swan.
Is Game
right?
Boy, was Wonder Swan Nintendo?
No.
she's
Okay,
right.
so then never mind. It's the first in landscape style in the Nintendo family, because Game Boy and Game Boy Color were
Portrait.
portrait, where you know, I guess if you were listening to this podcast, you already fucking know, I guess. But if you don't know, the buttons go on the bottom and the screen goes on the top. So originally, the Game Boy Advance was supposed to have online connectivity through a cellular service, and also was supposed to have a camera.
Wow.
It didn't, obviously not. But it did have wireless infrared connectivity. So the Game Boy Color had like the link cable. We had the wireless adapter for the Game Boy Advance. A lot of other like accessories, like the e-reader, the GameCube link cable, which that one you could hook up to your GameCube and you could play GameCube games with your handheld in a weird sort of way, only if they were compatible. It was only for games like Crystal Chronicles, Pac-Man Versus, Zelda Four Swords was the big one. Because you could basically, because Four Swords was on the Game Boy Advance too, right? Or what was the game you needed with it?
Yeah, there was a lot of games like interacted with each other. I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the name. I'm not a Zelda guy, but the first one that came to my mind is Metroid and Metroid Prime. So they released on the same day, and you could connect Metroid Prime to Metroid Fusion, and you could unlock certain things between the games, like it would communicate with each other.
Yeah, you could do unlocks with a lot of stuff. Like Pokemon was a big one because you could trade in between them with like Coliseum or whatever. But Four Swords specifically, which game was it that came out on the Game Boy Advance?
So Link to the Past had Four Swords Adventure.
Is that what it was?
Yep.
Okay, so you had that one, and you could play, I want to say like 4-player co-op or whatever, but it was with your Game Boy. It was strange.
It was Nintendo doing crazy Game Boy crap like they do.
Yeah.
The cool one for me is Pac-Man Versus, because like you control a Pac-Man with the GameCube controller, but if you want to control Ghost with other players, you can use the Game Boy Advance to control Ghost on the screen.
It was an
Pretty
interesting idea, that's for sure.
Kind of like a Wii U touchpad thing before. It's like a prototype for it, almost.
The hardware is considered comparable to the Super Nintendo, which I think is very evident. It's just as good, if not better, than the Super Nintendo.
Except for the sound.
It was the natural. It was the natural successor to a Super Nintendo if they didn't go 3D, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, that's why there's so many Super Nintendo ports on this console, and a lot of them, frankly, run better. Not all of them, but a lot of them do run and look a little better.
That's true. They do look cleaned up. The screen's so nice.
Yeah, they killed it with the screen.
Mode 7 on GBA is like a sight to behold.
Every time. It gets me every time.
Some of the notable launch games in North America was Castlevania Circle of the Moon, Namco Museum, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice Monsters, which I played the shit out of that game. It was so fun. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is a big one. Super Mario Advance, Earthworm Jim. And the final games released for the console in Japan was Final Fantasy VI Advanced in 2006. In North America, it was Samurai Deeper Kyo in 2008. And then in Europe, it was Columns and Crowns Choo Choo Rocket 2008, which I think are two separate ones, but they came out the same day.
Huh.
But we kept going 2 years after. 2 years after Japan, it was like, I'm out. We got a DS now. Fuck that. We kept doing them. The Game Boy Advance did go on to continue a little bit with the DS, because the DS was kind of backwards compatible, where there was a slot on the bottom of the DS where you could put your Game Boy Advance games and play them on one of the screens. Once the DSi came out, they phased that out, but the original DS did have the ability to play Game Boy Advance. It could not play Game Boy Color, though. It was only Advance.
Interesting observation. Isn't it weird how like backwards compatibility used to be such an important thing for Nintendo, and now they're like, fuck you.
I mean,
they've gotten better with like the online and stuff.
They've got a different business model, it seems.
They're not super into preservation anymore, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was I remember that being a huge feature for GBA, because people talking about it, because you got, like Brian kind of hinted at, the Game Boy's life cycle was so long, and everyone had a drawer full of Game Boy carts. Game Boy Color, not quite the same extent, but you wanted something like this wasn't that old, and you were like, hey, I want something that I can play these on. Game Boy Advance, to do that was a pretty big deal, and like hats off to Nintendo. It's very smart to implement that, because a lot of those Game Boy games were still great games.
I don't think there was there a system prior to this that had any kind of backwards compatibility at all?
Not without like attachments.
When did the PlayStation 2 come out? Was it 2000 or 2001? 2002?
2000, March 4th.
All right.
Handheld, so it's like, that's unheard of for a handheld.
Yeah,
I mean, there was
true.
What other handhelds were there though?
The market was pretty crowded then.
You
So
had
you gotta
the
think
Lynx,
Game Gear, Nomad, technically, even though it's a Genesis.
Turbo Duo, technically.
Like, there was big advanced handhelds. That's what people were kind of clamoring. Like, Nintendo needs to put something up to catch up, because like all of those came out before.
I disagree.
Yeah, Geo Pocket
Are
Color.
you kidding me? The Nintendo had it in the bag with Game Boy.
Yeah, but technologically, it was so far behind. The reason why it was successful because it had a built-in like market, already people bought it, but the games were primitive compared to all those. Like,
they were due for an upgrade as far as the hardware is concerned, but the software background was like outstanding, and like you're saying, just the longevity of it, the fact that you could buy games from 12 years ago that were still fun.
That's you look at.
Oh no, I mean outside the prior to the Game Boy Advance, they already had it in the bag with the color. There was nothing comparable.
Right.
They didn't have to compete with anybody.
Your biggest competition was Neo Geo Pocket Color, which I love the Neo Geo, but like, come on.
Honestly, like Nintendo's handheld was their star of the show, making all of their money. The 64 wasn't doing hot.
Yeah, it was
whatsoever.
GameCube was kind of a roll of the dice. Yeah, it wasn't. Nintendo was a handheld. I always thought of them even growing up as a handheld company.
The GameCube had to compete with the PlayStation 2 when it came out, which was a year prior to this, so they had to think of something.
Mm-hmm.
So the backwards compatibility for the Game Boy Advance made a lot of sense, because honestly, they weren't competing against handhelds. There was nothing on the market to compete with them. They were competing with consoles with a handheld.
Well, that's kind of the point I was making. Is like the actual handheld technological-wise was behind everything else in the market, and it was still dominant. You know, like the other handhelds are more visually impressive. The backlit screens.
What else was out at that time?
Game Gear.
Game Gear
Backlit screen, like.
The Lynx had
closer to a Genesis than a Game Boy is to a Nintendo or Super Nintendo, certainly.
I don't. The Game Gear is really hard for me to chew because it's so big.
I'll say this:
that's not really a portable system.
It's more of the
me.
actual
handheld. It's like 6 fucking batteries.
The thing itself was like the handhelds themselves had cool features, but the games sucked. Like, look at the Lynx; like it was backwards compatible. You could play it left-handed or right-handed, but the games were shit.
Say Game Gear's closer to Master System than Genesis,
but even then, a lot of the Game Gear. You know, how many kids you know growing up had a Game Gear versus a Game Boy? Like, the games on the Game Boy, even the original black and white Game Boy, were stellar still.
I mean, they had Zelda and Mario.
Exactly.
They were established. I mean, if they were boo-boo, if people still bought more consoles because of 2 titles, you know. So I don't think...
price point was big too. Nate's right. Like, Nintendo nailed the price. I remember the GBA when it launched was $100.
It's $89.99, I think. It was under $100.
I don't think anybody came comparable ever to Nintendo in a handheld market until the PSP came out.
Same. It was the first true competition.
Everything else was, I guess if you want to say it was technologically maybe superior, but the price point was so much higher. You had to lug around a weird charger because the rechargeability was horrible. We had what? How many batteries went in those things?
Bro, so many.
They're bigger than a Steam Deck at this point. They're huge.
Yep.
So then you had to have a whole bag to carry around where, like, the Game Boys, you could still have them in your pocket.
Sure, you could carry a case with games in it, and your Game Boy was still smaller than pretty much everything else on the market at the time.
It was still smaller than the whole damn unit.
Yeah.
So to me, that's when you talk about portability and portability and handheld consoles, like, they had it.
Oh yeah. Nintendo was king.
I'm not lugging around some big old thing that I have to
weren't.
plug into a wall anyways.
I mean, even now, Nintendo's flagship console, it's technically a fucking handheld. Switch is technically a handheld. Like,
You
full
gotta
circle,
think
baby.
this is pre-phone mobile gaming too,
Right.
so like portability was a huge aspect. Like, when am I going to carry this thing? And that is definitely like since day one, Game Boy's kind of had that in the bag compared to everything else.
Yeah, I will say when mobile gaming did come out, I feel like there was a dip in interest because that was the DS era,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
When mobile gaming started becoming a thing and it was even smaller, it was like I don't need to carry around a whole DS. I just got it on my phone already. It's interesting how Nintendo handles handheld through the years. But as far as like if you take out, I want to say phones as being, it's hard for me to consider a phone like a console.
Back
if that
then it
makes
was
any
so primitive.
sense.
Yeah,
too.
back then it wasn't.
It was like borderline flash games back then on your mobile phone. We're
Only-
talking flip phones, people.
Even now, my brain is like, I
people
guess
stream on phones and shit though. Like,
No, it's
No,
weird
well, I
because-
mean, outside of
yeah.
the streaming, like cloud streaming aspect, like just like games made for mobile for
Yeah.
me
yeah.
I
are really hard to
agree.
chew up because like they just don't feel like games.
It's weird how you can get shit like a watered down version of like Apex Legends on your phone, but like you could just stream it now also to any device. You know what I mean? Like, why wouldn't you just? It's. I agree. It's weird how far it's come, but I still don't consider it like a console or a threat to like console gaming or handheld gaming.
No, it's in that weird middle ground where I don't think it's a threat to console gaming. I think it's a kind of what do you call, like an addition almost. Like
Yeah.
especially people who can cloud stream with phones, that's great. But it's also like not a mobile market at the same time,
Right.
like a handheld console market.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it killed that market.
Right.
The Nintendo Switch, the only reason that people like it for its portability because it says a combo.
Right. It's console grade.
So I don't,
Right.
especially with the advent of phones, kind of like Nate was saying, like, I don't think we're ever going to go back to a stage where we have handheld, because people are buying Steam Decks to use as
Right,
desktops because they're
right.
cheaper than building a computer. Like, we don't travel anymore, so it's not like it was in the old days when you had your Game Boy in the car.
Yeah, there is made like back then. Like, these games were designed kind of like bite sized. Like, hey, I got 20 minutes to kill in the subway,
Mhm.
and it's like shit's so different now. Like, it's very this Game Boy Advance came out in a really weird time. Like, because 3D was kind of already established. I want to say
Mm-hmm.
it's definitely like a 2D console with 3D on it. Pretty much all the handheld competition, like there was technological advances, but like they were already buried. Like, Nintendo had already had that crown. So like this was a very interesting time for Nintendo to put out the handheld. They needed to put out something new because it's like Brian said, it's 12 years at that point. But they were in a weird spot where they didn't necessarily have to, but they kind of felt like they needed to. And like,
Well,
it's interesting, man.
I think that is a very North American viewpoint on it. Handhelds are a
Sure.
huge deal in
well,
Japan
internationally, you can
because
travel easier.
no, because in Japan alone, all they do is trains. They
Yeah.
commute. We don't do that over here in America like
But
Japan
no infrastructure,
does.
yeah.
So for us, it was. I think it died very quickly over here, but like things like the PSP Go or whatnot were very successful in Japan because of the infrastructure type, and they
Mhm.
lasted longer there. And that's why it looks like to me they moved on from the Game Boy Advance faster than we did because
Makes
they're
sense.
already on the next one. They're like, we're making the DS. It's already coming out. You guys like, whatever. You got your fucking PlayStation 2s over there and your Xboxes.
Well, and we had the copious amount of movie tie-ins that we had to do.
I would say
Oh,
that
Lord.
it kind of ties into the point I was going to make, where if you look at like games when they first started coming out for this thing, they were like console sellers, and like towards the end we got like kids. It's very directed towards kids. Like, throw a Game Boy Advance to your kids in the back seat while you're driving. Like, the market did shift in North America specifically for GBA.
It's hard to say. I mean, when you're
They were so cheap to produce Game Boy Advance for. Like, you had developers as small as us three sitting there making fucking games out for this thing, and like they generated it towards kids, like cheap, easy games to buy for your kids to entertain them. in
that's
the back
always
seat.
been handheld though.
Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, that's always, but it's hard to say this didn't spawn as a geared towards kids because like Pac-Man and Mario came out day one for this.
Yeah.
This actually was a very broad spectrum console.
Oh, absolutely.
This console was
Initially.
never like
It's one of the high
for
points
kids,
for me.
No,
but it
like-
also was never for adults. It was very
Yeah.
strange.
One of the high points for the Game Boy Advance for me is the vast, like, the library. There's so many different things on the spectrum. Like, you have your Marios, your console sellers, whatever. I'm interested in the top 10% and the bottom 25% of games, so this console appeals to me very much. There's a lot of like shovelware crap, but then there's like developers who would just be like, fuck it, let's see if we can get a 3D first person shooter to run on this thing. Like, the library is so vast, and it was weird because, like you were saying, it came out in that time like where there are starting to get higher powered consoles, but this was like the experimentation consoles, how I looked at it. Like, there's just developers who are like, fuck it, let's see if this will run on it.
I think
So cool.
it matched the time, though. I mean,
Yeah.
that's already what the other companies were doing. So,
Mhm.
like, for Nintendo to keep up, they had to. Because they're very first party.
Oh, yeah.
Nintendo's
yeah.
very first party, but, like, this is the one where they're like,
Open the
everyone's
gates.
got one in their hands, just make games so we can
Yeah.
make numbers. Because, like, the GameCube ain't doing too hot. We came off the back of the 64 not just failing absolutely. So, I mean, in competition with trying to make money against a PlayStation 2...
It's a great point, Barry, because
Yeah.
you look at Nintendo, like, NES, Super Nintendo, even, they had, like, very restricted, you can only make X amount of games a year for it. This is kind of the first console they had to, like, just put it out. We need money. And then you look at the Wii, and even the Switch now, there's just shovelware everywhere for it. It's a really good point.
I don't feel like there's so much shovelware for the Switch.
Most of it's digital.
There's more than you realize.
That's kind of where the market's turned, though.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, quote-unquote shovelware, it's very digital market heavy. Just
Fire
'cause-
50-cent game.
I mean,
Even
I get it,
shovelware's
because, like,
changed, bro.
the developer doesn't have to pay for physical manufacturing and whatnot, which makes sense. But, back then, I feel like they used the Game Boy Advance as their catalyst of, like, coming back.
Yeah.
They weren't doing too hot. They were holding on by a thread with the Game Boy, which it was incredible.
Oh, yeah, I know.
But that's
Game
what
Boy's
the console
insane.
was.
That's the thing. Can you think of another console that had that kind of longevity other than like some older computers and stuff? I know like the Commodore 64 hung around forever, but
The PlayStation 4.
yeah, was it 12? Yeah, I guess that gap was.
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
But still, like
That's how it is now, though.
look
But
how
at
long
the
that took.
time,
Back
at
then,
the
That
time,
was unheard
no.
of, especially for a handheld.
right. You got to think how fast technology was moving. But yeah, the handheld, it's wild, man. Because yeah, like you're saying, look at phones for example. That's the closest thing I guess we can compare being a portable device. Like phone technology was just like, I remember having a flip phone, and then it felt like X amount of years later, I was like, oh shit, this is an iPhone. This is basically a computer you're walking around with.
Yeah, like when they had a touchscreen for the first time, you were like,
Yeah.
oh my god, what is this?
So if the fact for a handheld market to hold on to that much, literally the handheld market was the Game Boy for that long of a time is just crazy to me.
I think it was also with the fact of the backwards compatibility, it was a smart move because like they already had all of their customers invested in the Game Boy Color, and games weren't exactly cheap.
Or you
No.
could be like me, and that's pretty much one of the big selling points. I coerced my parents into buying me the Game Boy Advance. It was like, you only have to buy, we can keep all of our old games, bro.
Right. You didn't have to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So people were more invested in buying into a new console because they're like, okay, well, I have some things to play on it as some more stuff comes out. And that's kind of how it was with the PlayStation 5, in my opinion, is like, we didn't get the backwards compatibility of the PlayStation 4 like Xbox did when they had the whole, just throw the Xbox disc in, licensing, blah, 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 you can get it. PlayStation 4 didn't have that shit with PS3. So when the PlayStation 5 came out, they were like, you could play basically every single PS4 game on it. I said, alright, like, the game I want isn't going to be out for another, like, 3 fucking years, but I'm still buying the console because it's going to play all my old games faster.
Yeah.
That's what Game Boy did. They were like, we can still play them all, and they're going to look a lot better. Now we've got backlit screens. That was only 2 years after the first one.
Yeah. It's a huge selling point when you're making a decision financially now because, especially with digital games going through what they go through. Like, I want my physical game to play on my new console. So it's pretty cool Nintendo to be like, we're making it happen, and we're making it happen for your Game Boy games, not just Game Boy Color.
Right.
So, great decision.
I'm sorry, did you say that the SP was only 2 years after the original Game Boy
Yes.
Advance? That's crazy.
2 years.
It's insane.
And then Micro was 2 years after that.
Fuck the micro. But
So,
the SP is awesome.
Speaking of the Game Boy Advance SP, there was 2 models. The first one, the big selling point for these was the backlit screen and the rechargeable battery.
Yep.
This did not take AA batteries. This was not like some of the previous handhelds where it took AA's and it had a rechargeable option that you had to plug into the wall. It was rechargeable. That was it. It flipped up, kind of like phones at the time period. It was very small. Then it had a second iteration. They call it the AGS 101. That one has a double backlit screen. So the first one, what it would do is you could click the backlight button and a light would pop up. You turned it off, there was no light at all. Like the original Game Boy Advance, no backlight. It's supposed to help save battery. The second model, it has a backlight and then a brighter backlight. There's no way to turn it off. It's nice. It looks pretty though. That backlit
Super
screen
nice.
is like very nice. But the rechargeable aspect of it was like everything.
Oh,
on
yeah.
this console.
And it lasts for freaking ever. Like, there's times where I don't touch my Game Boy Advance SP for months at a time, and like I turn it on, it's still charged. Like we played, what did we do for the podcast on G?
Golden Sun.
Golden Sun,
Sun.
yeah. I can't tell you when the last time I charged it. I literally threw it in, instantly turned on, still green light. I was like, okay.
I mean, mine is from freaking 20 years ago, and I don't think I've ever replaced the battery in it.
Never.
Nope.
And like, I will say, it's not like it used to be. I can get some solid hours of gaming out of it if I'm just playing it, not turning it off.
Right.
But for me to turn it off and leave it for like 3 fucking weeks and it still have juice in it,
It's wild.
it holds a charge pretty well. It doesn't discharge like just out of nowhere. And then 2 years later, the micro came out. I don't know much about the micro, to be honest, other than it didn't sell very well because, like, why would it compared to the SP? And it's tiny as fuck. So it's like a super tiny. Does it have a backlight on it, Nate?
I believe so.
I don't know anything.
Yeah, I think I'm an
about
expert.
Okay,
You're the
well,
one that owns one.
as I said earlier, Nate's the micro man.
I'm not the micro man. I will not go
he
by that
has
moniker.
one. So it looks just like an original Game Boy Advance, sort of, but it's square and it's tiny.
Another reason why I feel like it failed is proprietary charger. You have to have a charger specific to it. Your SP charger will not work on it.
Okay.
So it really isolated itself. And the whole, like we said earlier, the whole point of the Game Boy Advance, like, hey, your old shit's going to work. Even the SP, like, it had its own charger, but like, okay, it's a new battery. I get that. That makes sense. So you think on paper, like, my SP charger should be able to work on this thing. No, if you don't have that charger, like, you fucked.
Well, and that was Nintendo's first rechargeable console. Like, that was the first one. Like, you're going to get it with it.
And it's not backwards compatible. Like,
Yeah.
my thing-
no,
with the
I can't think of a
micro-
single good reason for owning that other than, like,
Yeah.
The
it being
Flex?
extremely tiny. I got a really good deal on mine, so that's
don't-
why I own one. But
That's the thing. So the SP felt like a big jump 2 years after the original Game Boy Advance.
Oh,
Like,
big,
The
big
micro
one.
feels like a regression almost. Like
That's-
you lose your backwards compatibility. Maybe backlit. We haven't confirmed that. I don't remember.
I brought it. Let's just pull it out really quick.
Well, you
Okay.
got to go get
We'll
it.
Get it.
It's in the bag. Or
But still, it's a regression. Like you
The
can't
bag's out of reach.
losing those backwards
Okay.
comp games is huge. It's a big loss for the system. And just because it's a little bit smaller, like
Here's the thing: the Game Boy Advance or the Micro felt like a novelty.
Yeah.
It was like, if they released it as some kind of like celebratory, hey, this is a cool little thing we're putting out. It's not going to be super expensive or whatever, but like it's almost like a novelty console. It doesn't look like it's supposed to be taken seriously, but I feel like it was supposed to be.
even with like the faceplate swapping and stuff, it feels like the old like Activision console with the face swapping things. It's like a toy instead of a console.
Okay, it is backlit.
It's backlit.
We barely got some
There's-
power out of it.
Yeah, I was probably the wrong switch. So, do you know how much time I've played this?
Micromaster.
I think it looks cool. I'll say that.
Is it better?
I made sure Micromaster's still not good. I'm not going by any of these monikers for obvious reasons.
I think aesthetically the micro looks cool. I don't think it's probably too comfortable to hold.
Well,
Like,
that and then like the cart's hanging out from the bottom. There's just
Right.
weird.
Yeah, the
it's
cart
a
does
weird,
stick out. It doesn't stay
It is
flush.
so small. I forgot how
Let
small
me hold
this
one of
thing is.
these.
It's
Let
so
me see
tiny.
this.
Like, so that's the thing. The SP addressed the only two flaws in general with the launch Game Boy Advance.
This looks like a knockoff.
I know, and it feels like cheap. Like, that's the thing. The SP addressed the two biggest flaws from the original GBAs. Everyone's like, "Damn, I wish I had a back screen, like backlit screen."
Oh wow, it is a proprietary charger. I've never seen one
Mhm.
like that. It's got a headphone jack though.
Does
You know, so you can listen to your jams.
and then
The Shrek. I just threw you off there, didn't I?
yeah, it's okay. So yeah, the SP addressed like the two only flaws I could think of with the original Game Boy Advance was the backlit screen, which there's like, here you go, Merry Christmas, and then it's like, honestly, it's more portable and it protects the screen, which the original GBA, the criticism's like the screen's just always out there, and like,
Yeah, it does
Easy to
protect the
fuck up.
screen, but bro, you snap that thing on accident, you're screwed. I'd rather have a scratch screen than a snapped SP.
I think it's weird
depends
too.
on what type of kid you were. If you took like really good care of your shit, if you were like carrying around in a fucking lunchbox, yeah, no, I hear you. There's arguments to be made for both, I guess, especially with like modern screen protecting. It's really easy to protect your screen. Now back then, like motherfuckers were just throwing these things around,
Right.
sticking them in their rock collection box, and
The rock tumbler.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting how Nintendo went like horizontal, then vertical, and then horizontal again.
That's why I say
Yeah.
it feels like a novelty.
Yeah,
Like a novelty toy, celebratory type throwback.
well,
piece.
that's the interesting thing too. With
Is the screen the same size? Or does it just
No.
look
hell
smaller?
no, it's so
Thing
much
is
smaller.
tiny,
Are you
dude.
high? Like,
See, that's another thing with the Game Boy Advance, though. Like
Here.
having the widescreen looked cool. Jesus, kitty fucking Christ! Oh my God!
it's barely as big as a screen, dude.
Can you imagine playing like Sonic Advance on this
Let me
thing?
see that.
It's impossible.
Well, it's like you're kind of talking about novelty. It's like the SP even. It's kind of like call back to a Game & Watch almost, where it like folds out and looks cool like that. And then there's this micro where it's like, I don't know.
This screen is like the size of the screen that shows the time on my stove.
I might be wrong with my timeline here, but like, was this coming out in the era when like cell phones like were super small and that was like the cool fucking thing? Was that like a thing when remember when like Zoolander, when those tiny ass cell phones like a joke, like a running gag? Was that like when the micro came out? Because like I can't think of a single reason why this like give me the micro instead.
I don't know.
There's a reason it flopped, basically, is what we're trying to say here. And like, you can't sit there and say it's a blemish on the GBA though, because like the SP in the normal GBA honestly did so well. Like no one remembers the micro for anything other than us to laugh at here and call me Mr. Micro for this episode. But like no one remembers the micro, and like rightfully so. And I don't think they tried to push it as like replacing your old GBA. I think it did come out as a novelty. There's a lot less of these produced than the rest of the GBAs. So
when you have
that
perfection,
felt like some kind of little special thing to like kick off the end of it, because the year after is when Japan ended production for it, and then 3 years after the micro is when the rest of the world ended it. But even then, it was like a lot of people were just like, "Why do I need to buy this when I already have an SP?" So
SP's the Game Boy Advance to buy. Like if you're gonna buy one in this day and age, like the SP is fantastic. I think all three of us own one, and all of us love it.
Oh, I mean, I'll put it like this. Like, I have the Game Boy Advance adapter for the GameCube, and I was like, all right, I'd like to play Golden Sun on my TV or whatever. And I was like, fuck this. I'm going to play it on my SP because it looks and plays so much better on it. Like, it's the best way to play GBA games still to this day. I don't have a Retron, so maybe a Retron is.
I would still rather play it on SP. I want the portability of it.
I tried it on the Retron, and I can say Golden Sun looked better on the SP.
See,
Speaking of Golden Sun, let's move on to some notable games we want to talk about.
You got like 8 hours. It's a great console, man. Like I said, I don't think it's a crazy argument to say that the SP is one of the best handhelds. It's on the Mount Rushmore of handhelds for sure. But think about all the games that started on Game Boy Advance. Nintendo, obviously, they have a ton of first-party games, but like I said earlier, the vastness of this library. So you've got, first-party games they're making. You've got games that they made sequels to. You've got remakes on here. Like, there's literally something for everybody on this console.
All right, tell me about some of your games.
So, a big standout for me, and one I spent a shitload of time with as a kid, was like WarioWare started on the Game Boy Advance. Yeah, it wasn't one of the first games I got because I think it came out in like 2003, but spent a lot of time with it. And it started out on the Game Boy Advance, and now it's this bigger franchise. It's literally just the simplicity of this game is what makes it great. I remember playing it in the back of a car on road trips, like loving it. I still think it holds up. I still think it's one of the better of the series on the GBA. But again,
Was that the mini game?
Yeah.
A bunch of mini games?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And it just gets faster and faster and more frantic, and you have to get more and more cracked out to stay on top of it.
It is like the perfect portable game.
Yep.
Like, it's honestly impressive that franchise is translated to like consoles, like with the Switch and not Switch. I'm sorry, with the Wii and
it's on Switch.
Wii U. I know it's on Switch, but it makes sense to be on Switch. That's like portable again.
Right.
But it's like it's bite sized. You can just kind of like jump in and jump out. The creativity on it's kind of purely Nintendo expression. Like so much wild shit going on in it. Like I played that game a lot as a kid too.
I think it's like the perfect analogy for Game Boy Advance. Like it's semi-experimental. It's different. It's unique. It's fun. It's really cool. It's a lot of fun. But no, it's like the perfect algorithm of a game developed for Game Boy Advance, in my opinion. Just for getting into it as an adult, like collecting later in life, there's a ton of great games for this thing. Some of my personal favorites, I'd be a villain if I didn't bring up the Castlevania games on this console. So they tried getting experimental with like Castlevania 64, and then they went back to like kind of the Metroidvania style. Yeah, imagine that, a Metroidvania where it's like actually Castlevania and Metroid. This console has some of the best. For the Castlevania games, they're different enough where you have like magic and shit, and there isn't whips in all of them. But they play like Metroidvanias. They're kind of like spiritual successors of the Symphony of Night, if you will. They run great, they look great, they play great. Some are better than others. Shout out to Circle of the Moon's my favorite on the console. And then the two Metroid games, they still stand the test of time for me. Fusions, literally they get a little more experimental and try some different things. Zero Mission, it's a remake of Metroid, the original one, so I think it's the best way to go back and play it. Dust off your NES cart, the game doesn't hold up 100%. It's nostalgia. The best way to play it, Zero Mission on Game Boy Advance. And then shout out to Fusion. I think it's the best 2D Metroid game made, period.
I was actually discussing the Metroid games recently with a friend, and I think I conclude the most that Fusion might be my favorite Metroid game.
I mean, yeah, Super Metroid's, I think, the best of the bunch, but Fusion's, I think, at the same argument, my favorite.
It's up there, dude.
Yeah, it's so unique, and it's like literally like we were deprived of a Metroid game for so long, a real Metroid game for so long.
Like I've heard this story before.
Yeah, and you gotta think this launched the same day as Prime, so like everyone gravitated towards Prime because it's got pretty graphics and it plays different. But as a true fan of the series, like original Metroid games, Fusion's great, man.
So what one game would you tell people that's a great collectible one? One game.
I mean, me personally, and again, my preferences, just things I like. Metroid Zero Mission. It's the most valuable Game Boy Advance game I have as far as like collecting, if you're into that.
Well, I don't want to necessarily say like
I'll say
pick a game
right.
because it's expensive, but like this is
watch out for it.
This is like a staple collection game.
I still think Metroid Zero Mission's my answer because like it's an exclusive. It's a beloved game. The original Metroid's beloved, but it doesn't hold up. This is like the best way to experience it. I still think it's my answer.
Okay, solid. I feel like a lot of people would agree with that. Like Metroid Zero Mission is like one of the Game Boy Advance games people
Fusion,
talk about.
But I think if you can find Zero Mission for cheap, grab it because Fusion's controversial.
Both of them, honestly, I hear both of them in the same regard.
I mean, I love them both.
They're both fantastic, and you can kind of discussing with my friend earlier about these Metroid games. You can kind of see seeds of Prime 2 and Fusion.
Yep.
So it's pretty cool that they like took bits and pieces and kind of continued on both Metroid franchises with these Metroid games because they're kind of separate, Prime and normal Metroid.
What about you, Nate?
Well, Game Boy. Me and Brian were trying to recall exactly before we recorded how we got our Game Boy Advance. Like we're determining how. But I was in trouble because I was already like boxed out from being able to play this thing when we first got it.
Oh yeah, quick Game Boy Advance. When you got your story, I like it.
So like, we'll just team up and do ours since we live together, you know. But I remember like Brian coming home from Best Buy and like, I knew Game Boy Advance was out. It wasn't really on my radar, but like, oh shit, you got one, and I wasn't allowed to play because I was in trouble for some reason. We don't remember why. Like we were determining me being a dumbass in my grades or like I did something to get boxed out.
So my brain's telling me like because
Brian's the one that got away with everything.
This is how I remember it because like Tekken,
he was good.
Nate and I were huge Tekken kids. Like we lived and breathed Tekken.
Yeah, like no
Tekken
doubt.
Advance came out January of 2022.
2022, huh?
2002. Jesus. Oh my god. Sorry, I saw Spawn 2 and my timeline's fucked. So I remember like sweet talking to my parents and being like, hey, this thing's backwards compatible. Like birthday, just passed. I got good grades. Like, you think you can slide me the GBA? It'd be really cool. And there's Tekken for it because Nate and I were like, I can't stress enough how obsessed we are with Tekken. And yeah, I remember coming home with it, like with Tekken, and being like, bro, Nate couldn't play it, so I had to like sneak him this thing so he could play it because he was in trouble.
So shout out to Brian for hiding me so I could play Tekken Advance, and it was mind blowing because it looked 3D and shit. Like it was incredible, and like Brian's hinted, we were super into Tekken, so we had to play that game, and that's the first one I was like, okay, Game Boy Advance is awesome. Like I'm convinced because I wasn't 100% on board. Like we need to get a Game Boy Advance. I was like, no, we do now because if this is what games are going to look like portable, this is crazy. So that's the one I probably put the most time into.
I want to give a special shout out also. 2001, same time as like Ultimate Spider-Man was really big, and all the accessories and things you can get for the Game Boy Advance. I remember shout out to Dad got me the Spider-Man faceplate, so it was like it could protect the face of the Game Boy Advance, or it just looked awesome, is what it really did. And then the Spider-Man light that mounted on top, where he's like holding a web bar with the light coming down. It was cooler than a warm light, and I still have my childhood Game Boy Advance with the Spider-Man stuff decked out on it, and I love that thing.
Yeah, it fits right up your collection in multiple ways, man.
Oh, yeah.
So with the library being as gigantic as the Game Boy Advance is, it's really hard for me just to pick one. Like, oh, this is like a collectible. Like, it has a time. I think there's over 1,500 games on Game Boy Advance. It's a big number. It's really hard for me not to pick. This era of Pokemon is pretty much regarded as the best era of Pokemon. The fact that the loose prices on these games are like shockingly expensive, and that these are very common games. I don't quite understand why Emerald is so expensive. I know it's
because it's the greatest Pokemon game ever, and they'll never remake it.
Kind of what I was gonna say. It's like it feels outrageous to say because like none of us at the table paid that much for our copy of Emerald because we just bought it when it was like a game before it was super collectible. But it's hard for me not to pick Pokemon Emerald if you go through like the longevity of Pokemon and how much staying power it has. Like Pokemon's not going anywhere. Like
It's the same idea as Crystal, as they did remake, like they've remade Ruby and Sapphire already,
Right.
and they made it clear they're not remaking the third.
yeah,
Just like, I mean, I guess they remade Pokemon Yellow with Let's Go, Pikachu and Eevee or whatever, but they never remade Yellow by itself. They always remade Red and Blue. They remade Gold and Silver, but not Crystal.
Never got green.
We
only got green.
Diamond and Pearl, but not Platinum. It's
Yep.
always the third one out that never gets remade, and that's always the expensive one of the sets.
And
And they don't do the thirds anymore.
right. So it's a hard pill for me to swallow to say like, oh, grab Pokemon. But if you're talking like long term collecting, Emeralds are like really kind of what I'd pick.
It is a hard one to really buy now.
It's a hard
For
pill to swallow.
sure.
'Cause it's almost $200 loose, which is bonkers.
And there's a million fake ones out there.
I mean, there's ones without labels that are still legit. They're going for $150.
Jesus.
Insanity.
Yeah, I mean, my partner pulled theirs out of the box and was like, "Oh, that's Pokemon Emerald," and they're like, "Oh, it's kind of beat up," and I'm like, "Do you know how much this costs?" And they're like, "I don't know, what, like $40?" And I'm like, "Bruh, no."
Well, I mean, even like
I was like, "Let me show you a worse condition one that sold for $160," and they're like, "What?" I'm like, this is the
Astronomical.
same person that pulled a Gold Star Charizard out of the closet, and that's fine, but
yeah, the Delta Gold Star Charizard. Yeah, it's fine. Like even Ruby's like $80 loose now. Like the Pokemon games on Game Boy Advance are
Mhm.
considered like the ones, dude. So it's hard for me not
I mean,
to pick Emerald.
honestly, of all of the remakes, like Gold and Silver, Soul Silver, and Heart Gold were the only really good ones. Really good ones.
And you look at the
Ruby and
prices on those.
Sapphire, Ruby and Sapphire on the 3DS, like aren't as good as the originals. I don't know how to explain why, but they're not. So if I'm saying like if I'm gonna play Ruby, I'd rather play the advanced one. But if I'm playing Gold or Silver, I'm playing the DS one. It's
And
kind of
look at the value on those to kind of explain like
Right.
my thought process here of why Emerald's just, even though the price is astronomical, it's kind of a safe pick.
it's the Battle Frontier. It's the best thing that Pokemon ever
Oh, yeah.
got, and they've never replicated it.
It's true. What about you, Barry? Tell us your Game Boy Advance origin story.
Okay, my first game I ever got when I was 7, I got the translucent purple, atomic purple Game Boy Color, and I got Pokemon Yellow. Like that was the first shit I ever got. And then years down the line, my parents didn't have like a lot of money, so we didn't get a Game Boy Advance until, now that I'm looking at it, about 2006, which is like when it was almost over. But the Game Boy Advance Platinum was a limited edition platinum colored Game Boy Advance. That's the one I got, and I'm seeing articles of it from 2006. So it looks like that one came out in about 2006. My brother and I always got the Pokemon games. Like one would get one version, one would get the other. I ended up with them because he doesn't care about Pokemon anymore. So like I have them all.
Clutch.
And that was also, when my dad told me to keep the boxes, and I always tell this story, and in high school, I'm like, I don't need these anymore, and I threw them away.
Not clutch.
I know. So for Christmas one year, he got the Indigo Game Boy Advance, I got the Platinum one, because I think my parents knew, like, I was more invested in it, so they got me the more collectible stuff. And then I got Leaf Green, and he got Fire Red. So I remember having Ruby and Sapphire, and I think I got those after Leaf Green and Fire Red, because Leaf Green and Fire were the newest ones, so I think my parents were just like, just get you the newest ones, because they came out after, and then I went back and got Ruby. Mine was Ruby. I think I got Ruby for my birthday, and my brother got Sapphire for his birthday, and then my parents, I think, got me Emerald for Christmas, but, like, I always got the special Pokemon one. Like, my first one of the second series was Crystal. Like, they didn't give me Gold and Silver, they got me Crystal. I got Yellow, I got Crystal. That's just how it ended up. I always got all my Pokemon games for Christmas, or mostly for Christmas at my birthday. Game Boy Advance SP, I never bought one. So I was staying after school in high school for, like, a club one day, and I'm standing out front, like, waiting to get picked up, just hanging around or whatever, the sidewalk with some fucking bushes, and there's mulch on the ground, there's bushes there, and I'm just standing there waiting, and I see this little cable coming out of the ground. I don't know why I looked at it, but don't know what I was doing. I looked down, and there's this black cord coming out the ground. I said, what is that? So I kind of just went over there and like kicked the mulch around with my shoe, and it was a Game Boy Advance SP. I'm not shitting you, dude. It was a blue Game Boy Advance SP that 101. It was a 101. Someone buried it in the ground with a charger, and it had a game in it, and I don't remember what game it was. I think it was Ruby, because I had 2 copies of Ruby at some point.
Damn.
So I was like, looking around. I'm like, someone buried a Game Boy Advance SP here. Fucking taking it. So I dug that motherfucker. It was shallow too. Like they didn't bury it very well because the charger was sticking out.
Dumbass kid, bro.
Right. So I took it home. I mean, it was a little wet because I had like, mulch and shit on there, and the battery wasn't bloated or anything. It lasted me forever until I finally got the Pikachu one, and I said, bye, see ya. I don't need that one anymore. So that's how I got my SP. I dug it.
Found pirate treasure, bro.
Yeah, dude, I dug it out the ground at my high school. It was
That's
so
amazing.
weird. Never had a micro though, but yeah, my SP story is weird. But in terms of like games, the one game I remember really liking as a kid was Jackie Chan Adventures. I don't know if you guys ever played that one.
Not on
the
Game
Game
Boy.
Boy, yeah.
But there was an animated show out at the time, and I loved it. It was like these little talismans would come out, and Jackie Chan could get like powers of like
show was dope.
the Zodiac or whatever.
It was dope.
Yeah, so they had a game called Jackie Chan Adventures, and I loved it. It was a beat 'em up, like a side scroller beat 'em up. I loved it. The graphics looked great. I actually want one now that I'm thinking about it as an adult, but like I played the absolute living fucking shit out of that game. Jackie Chan Adventures, bro.
It's awesome.
That and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dungeon Dice monsters. Because it was almost like Tetris. Like, what you would do is in Dungeon Dice, which I wish it lasted longer, but you would have monsters in these dice, and you'd roll the dice, and whatever side it landed on determined, like, how you summon them or their power level, and then the dice would unfold in a certain pattern, and you'd have to, like, make a path across the field to the other player with your dice. Kind of like Tetris, to move your characters across. And they made a physical version of it, which is pretty fun. They had little minifigures and, like, unfoldable dice and whatever. If I had to suggest anything to buy for the Game Boy Advance, there's a lot of really good titles on this one. But my personal one is either any of the Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6s, because, like, honestly, those are the best iterations of them. Hands down, in my opinion. They're obviously better than PlayStation 1. The load times are fucking awful on PlayStation 1. They look a lot prettier than Super Nintendo. There's more stuff. They've actually added stuff and fixed the translation a little bit, so it's the far superior way to play it. I don't know how it stacks up against the Pixel Remaster, but I just don't like the look of Pixel Remaster.
I'm with you.
In my opinion. Bar that, I'm going to say Fire Emblem. The first one or the second one. I don't know if they're ever going to remake it. Now, they have remade Fire Emblem in the past for some new ones, but I don't know if they're ever going to remake Blazing Sword and Sacred Stones, because those are the two that are on Game Boy, but those are the first ones that came to North America. They were on the Game Boy Advance. I don't know how people play those on a Game Boy Advance, especially like how long some of the... Because I've played the first one, there's 3 paths, there's 3 characters you can do. It's not like a take it out on a stroll and then turn it off kind of game, so...
I will say it's a great game, though. It's one I've actually played. It's the first Fire Emblem game.
They're
Awful
really
win, 'cause my
good.
boss from, like, I don't know, probably 6, 7 years ago at this point was like, oh yeah, check them out on the Game Boy Advance. And I got it for like $12 or whatever. And I was like, this game's really fun.
Yeah, they're very good. I would suggest those two. They're not crazy expensive.
For what they are, certainly, I think it's
They're
a great
not.
like collectible. It's a great pick. Like that's jumping in on something at the ground level of the U.S. release.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
mean,
affordable.
I think it's one that's going
for
to go
what
up
it-
and up. Too.
If
Yeah.
we're talking about like collectability of a exclusive Game Boy Advance game, that was the start of the franchise that we know now as
the
far as
States,
North
yeah.
America. So
That was going to be my pick, but I had like a psychic premonition you were going to pick it, so I didn't pick it.
yeah.
No, it's a great pick, honestly.
I'm predictable. But I mean, I'm looking at other stuff that I have and I'm like, nah, like Fire Emblem is like the Game Boy Advance.
In a weird way, do you think, I mean, obviously Final Fantasy Tactics came out on PlayStation, but
It was on Game Boy Advance too.
Was it really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
It's on PSP.
really great tactics games on GBA.
Yeah.
Like, shout out to Advance
Tactics
Wars.
Ogre is.
Yeah. There's a ton of really good tactical RPGs on Game Boy
Advance
Advance.
Wars.
I love Advance
Wars is great.
It started on GBA, yeah.
It's a great
Here.
platform for it too. It
It
just
sucks.
it's-
That's one I played a lot as a kid because I remember swapping it with a kid at school, like when I borrow fucking something for it. But damn, I wish I had one. I played so many hours in that game. Great tactics on GBA.
That's the really cool thing about this library. It's so varied. Like,
Mhm.
there's games that shouldn't exist for like the time period. Like, there's racing games, first-person shooters, tactical RPGs in general. It's wild. You would think, platformers and kind of puzzle games would be king, but really when you look at like the top heavy hitters, they're console style games on a portable.
I mean, to me, when I think of like what I would envision people having, it's like side scroller, platformer style, kind of like Metroid or beat 'em ups. I want to say RPGs, but like my first thought is like they're too big, if that makes sense. But they still work really well.
Yeah.
So I think that's implementing the system of saving anywhere. I mean, that's how RPGs used to be, is you could not save anywhere. You had to go to certain points and save at certain points, and that's not indicative of like a handheld style. So like Golden Sun, when we were playing it, like you could save literally anywhere.
Clutch.
And so you'd be able to play it for your 20-minute ride and then save it and then turn it off. So in that sense, like it does well. But if you have a handheld game and you don't have the ability to do a bite-sized piece at your own will, then it doesn't work. And that was my problem with I feel like Pokemon very early on was like, I'd be in the middle of a fight or something, and it was like, okay, we gotta get this car, and I'm like, I'm fighting the Elite Four, I can't save. Like, I can't save in this fight. It's not, like, short.
Yeah, there's some definitely, my collecting style is like weird, obscure shit, and this console, again, alluded to it earlier, is perfect for it. There's a port of Jet Grind Radio for the GBA.
It's true, there is.
I want it so bad.
Where it's isometric, and that was perfect for me. Like, I didn't grow up with the Dreamcast as a kid, and I was like, I can finally play this game that everyone's talking about. Plays completely different. It's literally like a top-down isometric view, and like it's kind of like Qbert controls, where left doesn't really make you go left; it kind of makes you go north, left. But it plays great once you get the hang of it. Graphically, it's insane. Like, it looks amazing. And again, playing this thing portable, like the full game's in there. They don't cut anything. I know it's really expensive now, but I remember back then being blown away by it, and I still am today.
I will say that is something to point out, now that you say it, is like there would be a lot of titles that would come out on console and on Game Boy Advance, and they're marketed as the same cover, the same title, the same everything, and then you get them and they're completely different.
Yeah.
Like Spider-Man that we did that,
Yep.
Yeah.
one.
And there's
like,
a couple
completely
that
different game.
adjusted really well. Like, I think the isometric view, you brought Tony Hawk's Pro Skater earlier. They're great games on Game Boy. Like, they're full 3D games, and you're like, how the fuck did they do this? But they made it isometric, and some of the levels are like 1-for-1. Like the hangar level from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 is in the Game Boy Advance version. It's wild. Like, there's some that did fantastic, and there's some you're like, what the fuck were they doing? Like,
I want to shout out Sims. Back when Sims was simple, Sims Herbs, bro, on the Game Boy Advance. Now we have all this crazy modding, whatever, expansion pack, blah blah blah. But Sims on the Advance was a time to be alive. That's for sure.
I don't think you ever played it on Game Boy Advance.
It's. I don't know if people would like it anymore. There's not like.
But that's the thing with this console, though. Like, we were literally kids when we were playing it, so there's nostalgia shit for me that I still own to this day.
See, I'm the kind of person who would still want to play. I prefer it because there's too much going on in the new ones. Like,
yeah.
There's so many things you have to be doing. And in this one, I'm just like, I have to go to my job, and I have to eat, and I have to shit, and I have to sleep. And that's really about it. And I have enough money for a not rugged down couch.
It's gotten away from being like a God game where you're kind of made it to like a life simulator.
It's like wild.
I saw a meme about Sims where it's like I made my Sim like my life. He's just sat in a corner and cried the whole time. Like,
there's too much going on in the new Sims. Like, I want old Sims, and Game Boy Advance gave that to me.
I want to quickly shout out like the interesting aspect of how many franchises caught a second life on Game Boy Advance. Like, Sonic was on the struggle bus pretty bad, but the Sonic Advance games kind of blew some like extra life into that franchise and kept it going. And honestly, same with Spyro and Crash. Like, PS2 was not as kind to Spyro and Crash as PS1 was.
All right, Spyro Season of Ice and Fire, whatever, they were fucking awesome.
They're fire games, dude. Like, the Crash games and the Spyro games, and they like kind of crossed over, and like they're fantastic. The Game Boy Advance kept those franchises alive. I think it's really cool.
On the same note, Mega Man was another one.
I was gonna bring up Mega Man also.
Battle Network games were great.
Oh, I'm so hyped for the remakes.
The era of Mega Man games from like that time, the Game Boy Advance were the better ones than the console ones. By a significant margin. I'm a little biased, but I think Mega Man Battle Network is like the best.
I love it.
And it's not classic Mega Man.
It's weird because I feel like the GBA gets lost in the shuffle because I feel like the DS was so successful as far as like starting DS to the last DS. Like Game Boy Advance almost gets lost in the middle, and like there's so much franchises we like have to thank Game Boy Advance for keeping relevant and alive, and it kind of gets like glossed over sometimes. I feel like
I would be a criminal if I didn't give a special shout out to Game Boy Advance Video. Shit was wild. Like I never had it as a kid. That's one I acquired later in my adult life. But I've got the Shark Tale and Shrek 2 in one pack, and it literally runs at like 1.5 frames a second. But the whole movie's on there. But I remember as a kid, it was cool. Like we didn't have YouTube streaming to our phones or whatever. Like the fact that, I remember Pokemon was huge. You could literally get cartridges of the Pokemon episodes and watch them on your Game Boy. Like pretty wild.
Well, it's like portable DVDs weren't quite a thing. Like they were trying, but they were just they were gaudy and expensive, dude. So it's like
we had hit clips. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what we had back then was the equivalent. And the fact they were like, yeah, we'll do full episodes, and it was like cheaper than a VHS or DVD at the time.
If you're wondering, the Game Boy Advance video carts are not compatible with the GameCube video player because they did not want people pirating shit. So you can't do that and see the horrible resolution, but you can watch it on a Game Boy Advance.
All I'm saying is they're dog shit in like the best way possible. Like if you get a chance to like throw one in a Game Boy and watch it, please do. It is the worst way to watch Shrek 2 in every way.
Let's see. So ending the episode, if you're interested, the Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack will give you access to their emulated versions of Game Boy Advance games if you're interested in playing some. There's some really good titles on there. Currently, right now, WarioWare is one that you can try. Brian mentioned that one.
Go for it.
Minish Cap, we mentioned that one as well, is on there. A really good Zelda game. I haven't played it, but it's beloved, and I really want to try that one. Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga is it's kind of like an RPG turn-based one.
Tactical, yeah.
Franchise started on Game Boy Advance, so it's cool.
So there's 6 of them currently, and I don't know when these new ones are coming up, because they're going to continually add them. But if you're interested, Golden Sun will be on there. It'll be playable, since you've listened to our episode. Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade, that I just mentioned, you should buy. You can try it out. It'll be on there. And Metroid Fusion will also be on there. Kirby Amazing Mirror, we didn't mention that one, but there's just some that we did talk a little bit about that is going to be on that service. I honestly really recommend it. It's not cheap, or it's not expensive for the service at all. So
it's something that they've kept adding to. It definitely like worth the value 100%.
Because not only, I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm sponsored by Nintendo to give away their fucking service, because we're not, but like...
But if you want to sponsor us, go ahead.
Yeah, if you get this like expansion pass, you get Nintendo, Super Nintendo, I'm sorry, there's a train behind me. Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis, N64, now Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. It's just incredible what they're doing. So I'm really looking forward to Game Boy Advance games on here. A lot.
Same.
But with that, that's the end of our episode. What's the next episode we have?
Y'all ever want to interact, talk, basically control a dumbass Pikachu? We're going to give you the opportunity. We're going to talk about Hey You Pikachu for the N64 in a riveting episode.
We're going to see if it works.
Nintendo 64. You've been picking 64 games at the ass.
Yeah, I kind of said in the year in review episode, it's a console I have a lot of stuff for that I've kind of neglected. So it's like I wanted to get a chance to break some of these out, talk about them, and play them, because I don't think I was going to pull them off my shelf otherwise. So I've always wanted to play this. As a kid, it's like incredible. Like I know it's not now, but like I guarantee you all three of us saw this commercial and we're like, oh my god, like
oh yeah,
I can have a Pikachu pet. This is gonna be the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And, like the commercial was a fire commercial. I pulled it up on YouTube recently. Like it's a great commercial, and like I'm sure this is not going to deliver in any sort of expectation. So we're gonna jam it in the Berries Pikachu N64.
Yeah, we're playing it in the Pikachu 64, the Pikachu controller.
Hey Brian, there's fishing.
out.
I think there's fishing. So
now you're playing with Pika power.
Hell yeah!
Oh, that's deep cut Nintendo pun.
Hey You Pikachu for the N64 on Is It Worth It next episode.
All right. If you liked what you listened to, follow us. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok at Collecti-Bros Pod. We are also still working on a Discord. I'm going to say that every single time until it actually happens, and it might be like 6 months from now. I don't know. I'm working on it. You know what? If you get this far and you're interested, say something. If nobody says anything, I'm going to delete the server and cry. How about that?
Pikachu's going to join it.
It's the only way I can keep the schedule together. Do not delete it.
Yeah, that's true. Are there any Game Boy Advance games that you have for your collection, you want for your collection, even just childhood memories of games that might not even be expensive, but you really enjoyed them? Get with us. You can send us an email if you want to, but we're on all the social media platforms available, and we will talk to you. Thanks for listening. Collecti-Bros signing out. Happy hunting. Bye-bye now.
Peace.
Bye.